See now, this video is about CAIIB risk management MCQs, that is the frequently asked questions part 7. Okay, so we will see the first question. Find the odd man out from interest rate sensitivity angle. There are 4 options given: term deposit, current deposit, reserves and surplus, capital, equity, shares. So the answer is term deposit. Term deposit is the one which is the odd man out. Why? Because it's very sensitive to the interest rate. We will see now why. I will explain you why. Because see the rest all 3 options, that is the reserves and surplus, capital, equity, shares and current deposits, are considered as non-sensitive to the change in the interest rate. Okay. However, these term deposit are by their nature sensitive to interest rate. The next question is the how many types of approaches are there to measure and manage the liquidity risk. See friends, to measure and manage the liquidity risk, there are only 2 approaches. The first approach is stock approach. The first approach name is stock approach. Second is flow approach. That's why the answer to this question is B, 2. Why? Because there are only 2 types of approaches for measuring liquidity risk. Okay. So that is the approach name is stock approach and flow approach. See, stock approach means what? Stock approach is the one which is based on the level of assets and liabilities as well as off balance sheet exposures on a specific date. When it comes to, so that's why it's called the stock approach. Okay, stock, it's based on the stock, assets, liabilities and off balance sheet exposures on a specific date. So next approach is flow approach. What is the next approach? That is flow approach. Flow, going on the flow. That is, this is the method which is very basic. So this is the one method which is basic approach, which is followed by Indian banks. And it is also called as gap method. For measuring and managing the liquidity. So flow approach, it requires the preparation of structural, that is a specific structure is there. According to that, preparation of structural liquidity gap report should be prepared. So in this method, in this flow approach method, the assets and liabilities are classified on the basis of the specific date of expected cash inflow or outflow from the assets or liabilities. That is, what are the payments that are required to be made during, say, let's say in next 3 months, or let's say the next 6 months, and what are the receipts that are expected during the same horizon. Okay, so next question is, thus therefore there are only 2 approaches, stock approach and flow approach, which are the basic 2 approaches which are required to measure and manage the liquidity risk. Moving back to the next question, that is CDS. It's nothing but credit default swap. What is it? They have given 4 options. The first is it a form of swap contract, or it protects a lender against default of a borrower for a fee or a premium? Third option is the sellers of CDS, that is credit default swap, are regulated by insurance regulator. Fourth is the A and B option. That is, it's a form of swap contract and it protects a lender against a default of a borrower for a fee or a premium. So we will see here the answer, as you can see, it's highlighted in red color, A and B. That is D option. D option specifies A and B. So CDS, what is CDS? It's credit default swap. Okay, remember that default. It means it is an agreement or it's a contract under which the CDS provider guarantees certain payments. Okay, the CDS provider who are providing the CDS, they assures us certain payments to the CDS buyer in case of any default by the entity on whom the CDS is given. Understood? As I will just explain you, as the CDS buyer, okay, CDS buyer will get his money either from the borrower or in case of default of the borrower from the CDS provider who has given the CDS, from there anyone the CDS buyer will get the money. So he has protected himself against both. Against the default of the borrower also he has protected himself. So under this contract, that is under the CDS, credit default contract, that is credit default swap means exchange swap contract. If the CDS provider is required to pay on account of default of the borrower, then all the rights under the original loan obligation are transferred to him. This is very important. Please listen carefully. Under this contract, that is the under CDS contract, if the CDS provider is required to pay on account of default of the borrower, then all the rights under the original loan obligation are transferred to him. In the other words, if you want, I will say you in short, the CDS buyer swaps the rights against the protection provided to him, to the CDS buyer. Then the last question of this slide, that is futures. So what is futures? There are four options. The first is it a futures is a derivative to hedge the risk. Second, futures is traded in an exchange and there is no credit risk involved. Third is the futures do not require margins and is an OTC product, that is an over the counter product. The fourth option is A and B, that is future is a derivative to hedge the risk and futures is traded in an exchange and there is no credit risk involved. So here the answer is D, that is A and B option. See why? Because future contracts, see futures contracts are used mainly to hedge one's status or hedge one's, you can say to hedge one's status or the main status or position, you can say. To be clear specific, you can say to hedge one's position. Okay. So for an example, let's say a cement manufacturer. Okay, a cement manufacturer who will need a specific quantity of something, a coal, let's say after 6 months. So he can hedge the price risk for the coal by buying appropriate number of future contracts for the coal. Okay, for the specific product, that is the coal. For him it's coal. The next comes, see, future contracts. Future contracts, they are traded in exchanges. The presence of a central counterparty, the presence of a CCP, that is nothing but central counterparty who interposes himself as the counterparty between seller as well as the buyer. As an intermediator, he will be between both, that is the seller as well as the buyer, and it almost eliminates the credit risk. Okay, it almost eliminates the credit risk. However, the future contracts are subject to margin requirements. They are exchange traded and not OTC traded. They are exchange traded and not over the counter traded and not over the counter traded. Now, in this slide, there are also 4 questions given. Okay, so this is the 105th question of us. We need to solve each and every question before attempting the exam. So let's see here, without wasting our time, just read the question. Forward contract. Okay, so what is forward contract? Forward contract, there are given 4 options. Forward contract is a customized financial product. Forward contract has credit risk. Forward contract is traded over the counter, and all the above is the 4th option. So let's see here. Forward contract. So forward contract is D, all the above. Why? See, not like futures contract. Forward is different, future is different. So not like futures contract, which is standardized contract, which are traded in exchanges. A forward contract is the one which is oftenly a bilaterally concluded. Bilaterally concluded, that is OTC contract. It's a OTC contract. In our previous slide, what we seen in the last question was the future contract is not OTC. Here in forward contract, it's mostly a bilaterally concluded, that is OTC contract. So futures are traded in round sums. For an example, let's say US dollar 2,50,000, US dollar 5 lakhs, etc. So the terms and you can say the terms and conditions of the forward contract are not having any standardized procedure. It depending upon the owner as well as it depending upon the customer it can change. Okay, so the forward contract could be for any specified amount. For let's say US dollar some any amount 1,13,363 something on and the date of maturity of the forward contract too could be customized. Okay, so as there are no central counterparty, the forward contract has the credit risk that the customer may fail to meet its commitment under the forward contract. Next, the next question is, see, dash helps, just concentrate there, see the question, read the options given and you itself try to solve the answer. Okay, I'm just giving you the answer. Answer is already been highlighted in red color. You can see the answer directly. Before that, you need to understand what's the reason behind the answer. Behind getting the answer, what's the reason? Why the question is like that and why is the answer this one and why not the other one? That is the only reason which I am going to explain you each and every question. I am explaining you each and every question now. So let's see here. See, dash helps to determine if a company has the right balance between capital, returns and risk. So what helps to determine the company has the right balance of three? That is capital, returns and risk. So there are four options. Risk adjusted return on capital. Second, counter cyclical buffer. Then the third option is capital, sorry, not counter, capital conservation buffer. And the fourth option is none of the above. So see here, my dear friends, see, the answer is A. The answer is A. That is risk adjusted return on capital. Risk adjusted, where is adjusted? Return on the capital. So why? Because it's an economic capital. It's an economic capital. And economic capital means it's the amount of capital a company should put aside, that is should keep aside, and is based on the risk it runs, and it's completely based on the risk it runs. So this the RAROC, risk adjusted return on capital, risk adjusted return on capital is equal to, there is a formula, it's equal to economic return divided by economic capital. Okay, economic return divided by economic capital. So what is economic return? What we take in economic return is all the revenues we will take first, then we will deduct cost, we will also deduct the expected loss. Okay, so there are many variations in the definition of this economic return. Then the next question, moving back to the next one, is unexpected loss. Unexpected loss means UL. Unexpected loss is that part of the credit loss that happens in the normal course of business due to the default of exposures, and the banks have to make provision for it. Is it true or is it false? So see here, it's true. Why? Because see, first, the basic principle of a bank is that bank should make provision for all the expected losses, that is EL. Okay, as it's UL, unexpected loss. So the basic principle of the bank is that the bank should make provision for all the expected losses. So the bank should hold that much sufficient funds or that much sufficient capital so that they can withstand the effects of unexpected losses in case they materialize, for an example. Okay, so to repeat in short, I will say expected losses. Okay, whatever the expected losses banks will be maintaining, that expected losses minus to provide for this unexpected losses minus to hold capital it should be. Okay. Now the next question is, this is just for your understanding. Then the next question is, how many subcategories of corporate finance have been defined under Basel guidelines? See, under Basel guidelines, how many subcategories of corporate finance have been defined? There are 4 options, 6, second option is 5, third option is 10 and the fourth option is 3. So see here, the option is B, 5. Why? Because the subcategories under corporate finance, under the category of corporate finance, the subcategories is, that is the category under Basel guidelines are: first is the project finance, second object finance, commodities finance, income producing real estate, that is called IPRE, income producing real estate. And the last option is high volatility commercial real estate, okay, that is HVCRV, high volatility HV commercial real estate, CRE. Now the next question is, see here, the question is expand. To expand LGD and EAD. EAD everyone knows, it's exposure at default. What is LGD? Is it loan given default or loss given default, or none of the above? So see here, the answer is B, loss given default. Why? Because just see here, LGD, loss given default, which means it indicates the amount of loss that could be incurred, or that would be incurred if a default occurs. Okay, if a default occurs, it indicates that the amount of loss that would be incurred if a default occurs. So what is the amount of loss? The amount of loss is expressed as a percentage of the total exposure. Okay, for an example, let's say for an example, loss given default LGD is 65% for an example, for any loan. For any loan of rupees 2 crore. Then if the loan becomes NPA, non-performing asset, if the loan becomes NPA, the bank may be able to recover that is, they may be able to recover the 65% of the loan. So let's say the loan is 2 crores and the term, that is the LGD, loss given default, is 65%. So the banks can able to recover at least 70 lakhs, they can able to recover if it goes NPA, and may have to incur a loss of the balance, that is the 130 lakhs ultimately. So what is exposure at default? So this is loss given default. Okay, I hope you are able to understand what this is. LGD, loss given default. Second is exposure at default. So what is exposure at default? Is for loan commitments and the measures the amount of the facility that is likely to be drawn. If default occurs. So see here, just for an example, assume that a customer is there, is normally using this, let's say any limit is using only to the extent of some percent, let's say 75%. So however, if the sale drops, unsold, that is the unsold inventory, so unsold stock mounts up, sundry debtors becomes unrecoverable. Sundry debtors, that is the debtors becomes unrecoverable. So his funds flow will be affected. So he may draw the SODRE, that is for an example, to the full extent he may draw. If the deterioration of the business, that is the, if the deterioration means if the business is going very low, that is business is degrading, let's say, if the deterioration of the business continues like that, in the same manner, the borrower ultimately gets defaults. So the banks may be in for a loss to extent of entire, that is the 100%, it will be for the sanctioned SOD limit, Okay, thus while the current level of exposure which I have mentioned you in the example was 75, right, 75%, but here the exposure at default will be 100%, not 75, it will be entire, it will be 100%. Okay, it will be entire, that is 100%. Then the next question is PD, that is probability of default. So what is that? Probability of default is that which measures the likelihood that the borrower will default over a given time horizon. Is it true or is it false? It's true. Why? See, PD, that is probability of default, is a number which is ranging between 0 and 1. The number which is ranging between 0 and 1. So 0 indicates there is no chance of default and 1 indicates that the borrower is certain, that is the borrower is certain to be get default or to default. Okay, so the closer the value is to 1, the higher the chances of default. So PD, that is probability of default, is also expressed as a percentage in many cases. Then the last question, see. So not the last question, this is the second last question. See here, expand LRM. So what is LRM? Is it learning and research model, lending review mechanism, loan review mechanism, and none of the above? So LRM, friends, listen carefully. LRM, this is the main term. These are the main terms. Okay, so this is one of the term which is very important to remember for you, not only from exam point but also from the knowledge point of view. See, LRM. So what is LRM? It's the abbreviation, that is the LRM abbreviation is mostly used to refer to loan review mechanism. The abbreviation of this, that is the abbreviation of LRM is mostly used to refer to loan review mechanism. Then the last question of this video is sensitivity test assess the impact of large movements in financial variables on portfolio values without specifying the reasons for such movements. Is it true or is it false? So see here, is it true? Yes, it's true. See, why? Because an example of a sensitivity stress test. Okay. See, an example of sensitivity stress test could be assessing the impact of, say, 200 basis point increase in the interest rate. Okay, let's say on the other hand, this is the one scenario. On the other hand, in a scenario analysis, the same scenario is visualized and the overall effects of the same are captured in the analysis. Okay, like say this analysis, a scenario analysis. So example of this analysis are many. It could be assumption of situation where the imports and exports from China stops for a month due to the, let's say, due to the tension that in the region between North Korea and the US. So in that situation, in such a situation, the lot of factors will affect. So the lot of factors would change, right? From the demand for gold, import export of India, entire will change. The foreign fund investments in this region in general and in India in particular, etc. So there are many list of factors that would be impacted, and these are the factors which will be identified, and then the combined effect of all these factors changing simultaneously would be evaluated. So thus, whatever they have mentioned here in the question, that is sensitivity test, that is sensitivity stress will come, that is this tension which I have mentioned you now. Stress test assess the impact of large movements in financial variables and on portfolio values without specifying the reasons for such movements. Without specifying means, yes, it's correct. Without specifying the reason for such movements, why is the movement happening, without, we can't predict anything. So without specifying the reasons for such movements, this will occur and have a large impact.